Montreal Canadiens owner Geoff Molson has completely cleaned house, firing several members of his management staff. Who takes over and what's coming next for this team? We'll discuss that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. We have some pretty significant breaking news from the NHL with the Montreal Canadiens. Owner Geoff Molson has basically completely cleaned house and will be starting fresh here with a whole new management team. And you have to wonder what else is going to be coming in the coming weeks and months ahead. Maybe even a new head coach. That remains to be seen. But Marc Bergevin is out as general manager of the Montreal Canadiens. Of course, we knew he was in the final year of his contract and that negotiations had not gone well for an extension. It was believed that Geoff Molson had made an offer back this past summer after the season was over. And of course, the Habs made a run to the Stanley Cup final. Things were looking good at that point. Things have started off an absolute disaster this year, but they have had a lot of changes go against them as well, which we'll talk about here momentarily. But that extension was not satisfactory to Bergevin, I guess. Appears as though he wanted more money or more term or a combination of both. They never got things worked out. And then many have been saying now for the last several weeks that this was pretty much a given, going to be his last year in Montreal. And I've said myself, it's like, well, if that's going to be his final year, I can't imagine, regardless of how Montreal is doing here, that they're going to get through the season without him being removed, because you would want a general manager handling the trade deadline and any moves to kind of set this team up for the future by whoever's going to be running it beyond this year. So I'm not shocked he didn't make it through the season. I'm a little bit surprised it happened as early as it was, but given how this season has gone, we know that it's a high pressure situation in Montreal and they want to get things turned around as soon as possible. Now, Bergevin is not the only one out of a job. They've also let go assistant general manager Trevor Timmins from his position as well. Timmins was largely responsible for their draft. He was quite often the head of that. And they also let go of senior vice president of public affairs and communications, Paul Wilson. So 3 members of the Habs executive team is on the out. On top of all these management people being let go by the Montreal Canadiens, we also got word last night that other assistant GM with the Montreal Canadiens working with Bergevin, Scott Melby, who was believed to be like his closest trusted advisor within his management team, also resigned from the Montreal Canadiens. The story behind this is believed that once Bergevin really decided that contract negotiations weren't going well and he likely wasn't coming back, that Bergevin had recommended to ownership Geoff Molson that Melby be considered to be the next general manager of the Montreal Canadiens, or at the very least be in a significantly higher role for the franchise. And it was believed that that might be happening, and once they got word for sure from Molson that that was not happening, that he was going in a different direction, then Melby decided to move on and resign from his position. And they have hired former Rangers general manager Jeff Gorton. Now, Gorton is not the general manager, though. Jeff Gorton, as reported yesterday, and we talked about this in yesterday's video, that he was had permission to speak with the Montreal Canadiens, and that it was looking like he was going to get hired in some capacity, but the NHL insiders were saying it did not appear to be for the role of GM, that it seemed to be a higher ranking position, and now we know that he has been secured as the new executive vice president of hockey operations. Now, Geoff Molson, the owner of the team, also carries the title of president, so he's the executive vice president. He'll report directly to the owner, and Jeff Gorton, for the time being here, is going to basically handle the day-to-day operations of what the GM would normally do, and they're going to conduct a search to begin immediately to find that next general manager. I'll show you a quick quote here from Geoff Molson, who made it clear that that's Gorton will be taking over the day-to-day stuff while they do the search, and that the next general manager will be able to communicate in both French and in English. So we know that in the city of Montreal and the province of Quebec, it's very important that their leaders of that team be able to communicate with the French media. That's something that's been important there for a long time. I know there's an argument that many make that they should hire the best person available, and that language really should not be at the forefront of the qualifications. And I understand those arguments, but at the end of the day, this is something that's very important to their fans, very important to their franchise, And are they limited in some capacities because of that? You might be able to argue that they are, because clearly there's a lot of great qualified people out there in the hockey world with tons of great experience that might do a fantastic job, maybe even a better job than other people they brought in. But if they don't have that French qualification, they won't be considered for certain roles. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody in the organization has to be fluently in French, but certainly key members like the GM and preferably the coach as well, to be able to handle the French media, to talk in both languages. So that's certainly a major development in Montreal. We've had other teams with stuff going on as well, but they've kind of taken over the news cycle here with this monumental decision. Now, of course, as I mentioned, you got to wonder what the future holds for head coach Dominic Ducharme. I mean, he was originally brought in last year, of course, after being with the team for a little while as an assistant coach. He replaces Claude Julien as head coach on an interim basis. After the run to the finals, he had the interim tag removed, and he's now head coach. But he's believed to be on the final year of his contract as well. So I'm not really sure we're going to see him removed, or if he is, it's not going to be like it's going to cost him a ton of money or anything like that. So I think Gorton is probably going to be responsible for this decision. Maybe they'll wait a little while until he gets a GM in place and he'll let them make that call. Hard to say exactly, but I think you can definitely call Ducharme, just like we already referred to Ducharme and Bergevin both as like a sitting duck coach and GM this year. When you're playing a season without that next contract, it makes it awfully tough if you don't have the confidence in place. Now, one thing I know that the Habs, in my opinion, definitely need to get better at, which was the drafting. I mean, Trevor Timmins certainly get a lot of credit for the drafts, but to me, in my opinion, really, if you look back over the last 10, even almost 15 years. That 2007 draft was really good. They drafted Ryan McDonough, Max Pacioretty, and PK Subban. Of course, McDonough was traded. That trade did not work out in the least and backfired on them. They still got Pacioretty and Subban. Both were again traded fairly young into their careers, though. And really ever since then, in my opinion, they haven't really had many first-round picks work out. They've had, they haven't always picked super high, but still, there was a long stretch there during this tenure that they really have not taken advantage of them. Look back to 2008, for example, they didn't have a first-round pick. They traded that pick away, so we can't really talk about that one. 2009, they used the pick on Louis LeBlanc, of course, a French Canadian, expected to be the next great French Canadian player. That was a big-time bust, never worked out at all. In 2010, they used a first-round pick on Jerard Fagerberg. That certainly did not work out well. I mean, they had hopes of a big, strong, tough defenseman. Never worked out. In 2011, they drafted Nathan Beaulieu in the first round. Again, a serviceable player, but nothing high-end. In 2012, they got the number 3 overall pick and used it on Alex Galchenyuk. We know how that worked out. He had his moments, but largely a disappointing NHL career, not living up to a number 3 pick standard. If he had been a later pick, things wouldn't really be viewed upon that way. He did have a 30-goal season, but, long-term did not work out. 2013, Michael McCarron, again, a big center iceman, but certainly had a lot of skating issues. He's still kicking around in professional hockey, but really has not seen much of anything in the NHL. 2014, they drafted Nikita Scherbak. They basically ended up giving him away after a number of years of not getting that development. Then they also had Noel Juleson in 2015. He's not worked out. He ended up battling some injuries, mind you, but still another first-round pick that did not work out. Eventually, he moved on, but has still never really found his game at the NHL level as of yet. 2016, they got Mikhail Sergachev, and of course, they traded him for Jonathan Drouin. And as much as Drouin's had his moments, I think they'd probably like to have a do-over on that, and at least I would think so. Sergachev's proven to be a really good defenseman in Tampa, and of course you got Ryan Poehling in 2017. The jury is still out on Poehling. I'm not going to call him a bust, but considering how high he was drafted, and we're now in 2021, and it was 2017 he was drafted, that's a long time to not even be a regular NHL player. So even if he becomes one, I'm not sure he's going to become the high-end player that they thought they were getting when he was drafted. Of course, 2018 was Kotkaniemi. They could have had Brady Tkachuk. They chose not to. They took the Finnish center iceman due to a organizational need over the best player available. That's proven not to be good. I mean, look, he's already gone from the organization through an offer sheet. Yes, they got some compensation back, but still, just not a great showing there. I mean, the more recent ones after that, it's still too early to tell. We hope that Cole Caulfield will be a star. He showed that in the playoffs that he has that potential. Struggled this year, so we'll see where that career goes. 2020, Caden Gooley, he still looks like a good prospect. Way too early to make that judgment call, so we're not going to go there yet. And of course, in 2021, they really put another stain on his franchise by taking Logan Mailloux. Late in the first round, after all the charges and allegations against him, the Habs shocked everybody at the 2021 draft, making that selection. And I'll still never forget Trevor Timmins doing an interview, I believe it was the next day, being asked about it, and him sitting there kind of twiddling his hands, going, he didn't know what to say. Like, I'm sorry, but Trevor Timmins has not done a good job in his role here, and I would have liked to have seen, them certainly make a lot of different moves. Obviously this is a draft and development league, and Montreal has not drafted well. Like I said, they have 7 players on their active roster that were drafted. Out of those 7, there's probably about 3 or 4 that is still even too early to say if they're going to be regular NHL players because of the situation they're in with injuries and stuff. So Paling and Caulfield, Pizzetta, like those guys, it's early to say what they're really going to be like long term. They got 9 players they have on their roster via trade, and another 8 more through free agency, 1 on waivers. So they've really had to rely heavily on those offseason moves to trade and sign free agents to be where they are today. And obviously, the team was good last year, but look at what they've lost. I mean, it was the expectations were super high this year, but to me, that was not really great, considering they knew coming into the year that they were not going to have Shea Weber. That was pretty apparent pretty much, not long after the finals. That's a huge blow to lose Weber. They didn't re-sign Corey Perry. That was big for them as well. Another veteran guy who was a monster in the playoffs, a good warrior for them. And of course, Carey Price goes into the player assistance program, and he's still not with the team. So you go down those 3 vets right there. That's a big, big blow right off. They have, Joel Edmondson misses training camp, had doing a lot of personal stuff that he was dealing with. Another big blow. And the list goes on. They had a major change. They brought in a few decent players in the offseason, but those players, even though they have had good track records, like David Savard, I'm not sure what's up with him. He doesn't look right. I know a lot of people on social media have asked, is he overweight? Is he out of shape? Just doesn't look like what he used to look like. So, it's not always you need to have that draft and development, and they have the young talent that they can be okay moving forward. They really do have a lot of players in the last couple of years, even though they made some questionable draft picks, in my opinion. If they can continue on at the pace here, and Jeff Gorton should be able to help tremendously with the drafting part of it. He had a tremendous draft record between his time in Boston before he got let go. Of course, he was an assistant GM, got promoted to GM on an interim basis. They decided to go with Peter Chiarelli. He eventually was let go there in Boston. Got on with the Rangers, was GM there for, I think it was 6 years total or close to it. And their draft record was significantly better. To me, that was a major strength of his. And I think that's probably a big part of the reason why Molson was so anxious to talk to Gorton and get him on board, is to really help with that part of the business here. So ultimately, Jeff Gorton will be hiring and be responsible for finding the next general manager. You have to think Dominic Ducharme more than likely doesn't come back, but I think they're probably going to take their time with that and see where things go. But at the end of the day, big changes are coming. Now, could Patrick Waugh be the next general manager? Now, I know on Hockey Night in Canada, 32 Thoughts, last night, Merrick and Friedman were talking about some potential candidates, and it was mentioned by Merrick that as of the recording of that segment, that they could not confirm that the Montreal Canadiens have reached out to Patrick Waugh. That doesn't mean anything. At this point, I think Molson was content to do his meetings and get Gorton on board, and then he'll be responsible for finding the next player, or the next GM, and they do want him to be bilingual and speak good French. So clearly, that gets him in the conversation. There's been other former players mentioned here. You got Vincent Donfus, who's been mentioned as a potential candidate. We've even heard Matthew Darch, who had a limited NHL career, but has been working with Tampa under Julien Brisebois. Of course, Brisebois, I think at one point would have been looked upon as being a great successor, but he's pretty successful and tied up in Tampa. They're not going to be able to have that option for who knows how long. Now, another name as well, besides Patrick Waugh being mentioned out there in the media, that kind of makes some sense as well, would be a French-speaking former NHL player who had a connection to Montreal, Daniel Briere. Now, Briere also has connections to Jeff Gorton as well. Of course, he has worked at a lower level during their time with the New York Rangers organization, so they're certainly very familiar with each other. Briere obviously speaks French, former player, very well-respected guy moving up the ranks within the hockey management world that many feel will likely be a general manager in the NHL someday soon. This could very well be the opportunity that he's been looking for. So as much as I think that, Patrick Roy would make a lot of sense, it's not certainly a given by any means, but like I said, I believe both these guys should likely be considered for the job. So those are some of the names that have been kind of out there. We know Patrick Roy certainly has connections to this franchise after being a longtime player. We know that he obviously had some bad blood when he left town, but that's all been kind of made up. And we've even seen the commercials he's made with Muriel Tremblay. That has been mended. To me, we know for sure that he's trying to make a return to the NHL, that his agency that he's been working with have been trying to find him opportunities in either coaching or management. And I think management, to me, is where he probably better fits than anything else. We know that when he was in Colorado with Joe Sakic, a big part of the reason that they kind of ended up leaving, I think, is he wanted more say over player personnel decisions, and that's more the role of the GM than the coach. And they kind of, as much as they were good friends and worked well together, they also butted heads, and it caused it not to work. So to me, I think there's a good chance Patrick Roy is going to be interviewed and discussed here, given the circumstances, given where he's at, his experience. I mean, not saying for sure he gets the job, but I can pretty much guarantee he'll be considered, and I will be completely shocked if he's not at least interviewed and considered. So we'll see where this goes. The story is not over. It's just beginning, but Molson and the Habs have cleaned house, and we'll see what comes next for this team. So let me know your thoughts on the moves, if Jeff Gorton is the right guy to lead this franchise. He certainly has a great track record, but who do you think he hires? What are your thoughts on him as the executive VP? And we'll go from there and discuss in the comments. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.